just want to say a few very quick words about our first speaker, Timothy Garton Ash. So I think it could be said that the term public intellectual was designed for him. He's somebody who has been exceptional in combining success both in academia and also in journalism. He's Professor of European Studies at Oxford and is recognised, I think, worldwide as one of the foremost experts on the contemporary politics of Central and Eastern Europe. That was, I think, exemplified in the fact that he did some of his postgraduate work in East Berlin when there was such a place. And one of his publications was based on his 300-page plus Stasi file, and I gather makes fascinating reading. Of his many other publications, the most recent is entitled Free Speech, 10 Principles for a Connected World. He may correct me because he's so prolific that this is last week's news and may already be out of date. He is distinguished by having received awards from many overseas governments. For his journalism, he's been a recipient of the Orwell Prize, and very significantly in 2017 was the recipient of the Charlemagne Prize, which I think reflects his work on bringing together people from many parts of Europe. He was listed in 2005 in Time magazine as one of the world's 100 most influential people. But that was 14 years ago, before he became quite as distinguished as he is now. Quotation shelves are where most works of history spend their lives. But the kind of history Garton Ash writes is more likely to lie on desks of the world's decision makers. So I need to say no more than that, and I'll hand over to Professor Garton Ash. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Now you can hear me, I hope. Good evening, Oxford for Europe. It's fantastic to see so many of you here. When people are introducing themselves at events, where are you from these days, I tend to say Oxford, Europe. Because of course Oxford could no more be removed from Europe than Carfax could be removed from Oxford. It always has been and always will be a great European city. But our subject today is the political community of Europe, and not just the continent, the cultural and historical entity. Let me start by telling a story which relates to a book I'm just working on, which is a kind of personal history of contemporary Europe. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a small village in northern Germany, which my father's gun troop had occupied at the end of the Second World War, 1945, 1946. And all I had from that period was a couple of grainy photographs showing British officers watching cricket in this village. What could be more normal than watching cricket, except actually a cricket game in June 1945 in the middle of Germany was not so usual. And I thought I'd try and find out what people remember from that time, and I was absolutely amazed. I got there, and they had pulled together about 15 people, all of whom had the most vivid memories of the end of the Second World War. They remembered what they called Der Engländer, Der Tommy, they called them Tommy, coming over the river. They remembered the 30, 18 and 19-year-old German sailors who had been sent to defend the eastern bank of the river, and that most of them died and buried in the cemetery. They remembered the forced laborers from Russia and Poland who'd been working in the chemical weapons factory just nearby, and who now came to plunder the farmhouses to take their revenge. They remembered the German expellees from Silesia and East Prussia, who'd come on an endless trek thousands of miles on foot and on a horse-drawn cart and were quartered on. They remembered the British officer who had arrived in their house, and the first thing these British officers said was, "You'll never guess." The first thing they said was, "Could we make a cup of tea?" So they made a cup of tea. And this elderly woman was telling me, and we were standing out on the terrace looking over the river, and this elegant British officer was just standing there with his cup of tea. And then there was a shot, and the cup of tea fell to the ground, and he fell to the ground. And he was killed. He'd been killed by a sniper, a German sniper. So they remembered, here were people who remembered everything about that period. In their minds it was completely present. And I tell you this to make two points. First of all, it was those personal memories of war, occupation, Holocaust, Gulag, fascist dictatorship in Spain or Germany, communist dictatorship in Eastern Europe, which drove 3 generations forward to make the European Union we have today. And secondly, if you had told the people in that village 74 years ago, in May 1945, that we have the Europe we have today, they would not have believed it. A Europe in which Germany, a liberal democracy, peacefully united, albeit in new frontiers, has neighbours that are liberal democracies to east and west, south and north, all these countries united in the same political, economic, legal and security communities. And what is more, you can wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday and decide you want to fly to the other end of the continent, jump in Ryanair, or if you're lucky, EasyJet, fly to the other end of the continent, meet someone, settle down, get a job there, study, work, live and love, from one end of the continent to the other, and you will be in a liberal democracy, one and the same communities. There has never been a Europe remotely like this. It is without question the best Europe we have ever had in European history, bar none, full stop. So there's a lot to celebrate. But this extraordinary achievement is now under existential threat. And not just from Brexit. Brexit is just one aspect of a much wider European crisis. So it's dramatic because it's one of the largest member states actually deciding to leave. Incidentally, a side effect of Brexit has been that countries like Poland and Denmark, which were vaguely contemplating the idea of possibly doing Polexit or Danexit or Hindexit or Czechsit, have now decided it's a very bad idea. And support for leaving the European Union in all these countries has gone down. But Brexit, which many people even on the continent think about as a kind of sort of English eccentricity, is actually not. In many respects, it's just one symptom of a shared European crisis. Yes, there's the Rees moderator. Yes, there's a peculiar English obsession with strictly legal sovereignty, which I think goes back all the way to the 1533 Act in Restraint of Appeals to Rome. Strictly formal legal sovereignty, I emphasize, not effective sovereignty. Yes, there's a very respectable concern about democratic self-government, but most of the causes of Brexit are common European causes. What are the other dimensions of that crisis? Well, for starters, for the first time since the end of the Second World War, we have seen one European country simply seizing, annexing by force part of the territory of another European country, Crimea. So don't tell me we have a Europe entirely at peace. There's still a war raging in eastern Ukraine. In Hungary, you have a leader who has demolished liberal democracy, already demolished liberal democracy, with the aid of EU subsidies, using EU money to demolish liberal democracy, and conducting a dog-whistle anti-Semitic campaign against George Soros. In Poland, you have a party which wants to follow the Hungarian example. In many parts of southern Europe, you still have the really deep negative after effects of the Eurozone crisis, which have not been overcome and which saw youth unemployment soaring up to close to 50%, so that people who had doctorates from a Spanish university had to come and work as waiters in restaurants in Oxford. I never forget meeting one of them, a lad called Julio, in Al-Andalus. Anyone been to Al-Andalus in Little Clarendon Street? Well, there was this guy with 3 degrees working as a waiter there. And that crisis has not been overcome. The Spanish election result is a good sign, an encouraging sign, but a far-right party that hankers back to the good old days of Generalissimo Franco got 10% of the vote. 1 in 10 votes, so don't have to be too self-confident. In many other parts of the continent, you have nationalist populist movements which are still gathering a large part of the vote. Even in famously social democratic Scandinavia, in the recent Finnish election, the so-called the Finns, previously the true Finns, as opposed to false Finns, who were of different colour or religion or ethnicity, got just a whisker less of the vote than the Social Democrats, 17.5%, large share. In France, at the moment in the opinion polling for the European elections, Le Pen's Rassemblement National is neck and neck with Macron's pro-European En Marche. So wherever you look, and then this is not to mention Trump's America turning away from Europe, leaving us to rely on ourselves for our security. It's not to mention the climate change emergency or many other problems. So that from all sides, not just from Brexit, the achievement, the great historical achievement of the European Union is under existential threat and needs people to come to its defense, including, very importantly, those who I call the 89ers, people born between, say, 1980 and 2000, today between 20 and 40, right? So previous generations, including, I think, looking at many people in this room, remember, if not the Second World War, the Cold War, probably know a country or two which had until quite recent times a dictatorship. If you're an 89er, someone of that generation, you have known nothing but this Europe virtually whole and free, composed of liberal democracies where you could travel from one end to the other without let or hindrance, settle down, get a job, study or work. And there is one of the problems of Europe at the moment is it has both the problems of failure and the problems of success. So we're paying the price for many of the failures of European policy over the last 30 years, like the structural problems of the Eurozone, or the great inequality that followed the spread of globalized financial capitalism and was worsened after the Eurozone crisis and the financial crisis. But we're also have a problem of success, that there are many, many people, particularly from the generation of the 89ers, who do not really believe in their bones that all these achievements are under threat and that they could unravel very, very quickly. So actually the murder of Lyra McKee speaks for a larger phenomenon. It's not until someone is actually, an innocent young woman is actually murdered on the streets that people wake up to how critical the situation is. And I think a lot of people are still not woken up. And this brings me, and this is my last point, while remaining strictly non-political, as we all sworn to be, to the European elections. So the European elections have become unusually important. Normally, if you ask party activists, European elections are not about Europe. They're fought on local issues by local parties, and people vote on local issues. This time, all over Europe, for once and at last, the European elections really are about Europe, and they really matter. And across the whole continent, as in this country, it's really about the future of Europe. The Electoral Commission in this country recently tweeted the following figure. 1 in 3 people between the age of 18 and 34 is not registered to vote. 1 in 3, so my age and ours, including many of our students. So the one thing we certainly have to do, and we have just a week and a day to do it, is to make sure that anyone who hasn't registered does register. I've just actually given a prize for a competition between the colleges of Oxford University as to who can register the most students to vote. Modest prize. We have to get them registered. We have to register ourselves if we're not registered. Of course, Irish citizens and, oh irony of ironies, Commonwealth citizens, resident here, can vote anyway. So if you know any friendly New Zealanders, get them to turn out for the European elections. Crucially also, British citizens living in the other 27 countries of the EU can vote here if they haven't lived abroad for longer than 15 years, but they have to go through quite a process to do it, which maybe Catherine will say more about. They have to actually get in touch with their local electoral registration office. And then there are the 3 million plus citizens of other EU countries who live here. And they are all entitled to vote as European citizens, and most of them are not registered to vote. And they not only have to register to vote, they also then have to fill in a form that is online, which says I'm not going to vote in my home country, and physically or perhaps by email get it to the electoral registration office. In my view, this is a scandalously anachronistic and obstructive process. In an age when we pay our bills online, why you can't register online, I do not know, or maybe I do know, I have my suspicions. Strictly non-political suspicions, of course. But if you know any EU citizens living here, friends, neighbours, please get them to go through that rather irksome process, because it really matters of the turnout. And now I'm going to say my final and really not party political thing, which is this. If you were, like me, someone who believes passionately we need a second referendum in order that Britain will vote to remain in the European Union, then you would look at the parties. You would, as Peter said, be really worried by the still absurdly fudge-like fence-sitting position of the Labour Party, now reinforced by the NEC, and you would see 5 parties which are unambiguously pro-Remain and pro-second referendum. Lib Dems, Change UK, Greens, SNP, Plaid Cymru, and you would, if you were this hypothetical person, talking not at all party politically, you would vote for one of those parties to send the message. Now, as you all know, there is a real problem with the PR system which prevails in the European elections. Maybe Catherine will say more about it, which is that under the D'Hondt method, it punishes small parties in the regions for the European elections. So we have a big problem that the vote is divided between the parties. There's not a great deal we can do about that now, but think about it as a second referendum. Think about it as a pre-referendum, and say what really matters is the turnout and the vote. Who votes for pro-Remain, pro-referendum parties, and who doesn't. And that tells you just how important that is. That is what this hypothetical party political person would tell you. In the immortal words of the House of Cards, I couldn't possibly comment. But what I would say is that these European elections matter more than any in the last 40 years. There's a huge achievement in the European Union. It is the best Europe we've ever had, but it's under attack from all sides, and it needs us to get out there and defend it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Timothy. That was superb, learned, and moving, and very much, as we know, you can speak and speak from the heart. Can I just, questions will be later. I'm sure you have plenty of questions and there will be plenty of opportunity to ask them. But just to comment on behalf of Oxford for Europe, I'm very glad you mentioned the question of electoral registration, and this is crucial. We have actually written to the heads of the common rooms of all the colleges, because that seemed to be the best conduit to the students. It does appear that there's a bar on education institutions actually taking active steps to encourage people to vote. And that I think is most unfortunate. There may be others who can speak more about that, but we are doing what we can. And those of you who are interested and want to register, or have friends who want to register as European nationals to vote, there'll be information on the side over there for you. So please do feel free to ask. So that was all I was going to say about that. Just parenthetically, to mention that we do welcome people tweeting. Those of you who are on Twitter, we won't be in a position to deal with any tweets this evening, but they'll be out there in the Twitter sphere. And we have got our own Twitter label, which is @OxfordStays, and I propose that we should use a hashtag as well. And could I propose that those who want to tweet to a hashtag, you can use hashtag OFE Town Hall, all one word, for the want of anything better. I think that would be unique, and you can use that, and then you can share any thoughts with other people in the room who are tweeting at the same time. I hope that works.